Hello, it's Julia. It's Wednesday. It's time for another instalment from Leopard in the Golden Cage. Sorry about the mirror image. If you watched one of the earlier videos, you'll know I'm doing all this on my phone. I'm in the kitchen again today, hoping not to be photo bombed or video bombed. Is that the word? By my family quite as much as I was yesterday. I also managed to upload yesterday's video to my personal page instead of the Scargatherer page, and I had to take it down and put it back, and I hope you found it. So if you're looking for chapter 5 of The Leopard in the Golden Cage, it is there from yesterday. I hope you can find it. If you can't find it, message me and I can forward you a link that will take you directly to it, because I don't want you to miss it. So yeah, we're on to chapter 6, which must mean I've been doing this for a week. I think I started last Wednesday. Now, let's have a look. Chapter 6. Oh, here we are. Okay. So, Joe has been, he's back in the present. He's at Fishbourne Roman Palace with his dad and his brother because he's asked to go back again because he wanted to find out a bit more about it. And now he's taken his chance to get away from Dad, slip away from Dad, and climb down onto the mosaic again because he's hoping that it'll take him back into the past. And he knows he shouldn't. He shouldn't do it. You don't walk on mosaics in ancient palaces. You just can't. But he does. Okay. So at the end of chapter 5 it says, for a second time he climbed quickly through the rail and dropped down onto the floor below. Chapter 6. What on earth do you think you're doing? Joe froze. He could hear Dad's footsteps hurrying along the walkway towards him. I thought you said you were going to the loo. Joe stared at his feet on the coloured tiles of the mosaic. He was sure this was exactly the place he'd climbed down last time. But it hadn't worked. He was still here, in the present. And now he was going to be in trouble. He's probably looking for his St. Christopher, Sam called out. Joe climbed back up through the rail. The one I gave you? Dad stopped in front of him. Oh, Joe. Joe hung his head and said nothing. He dropped it down there last time we were here. I bet that's why he really wanted to come again. Sam was smug. It's not. Joe was about to add that he'd forgotten all about it, but one look at Dad's face stopped him. He swallowed. How did you lose it? Dad asked quietly. The chain broke, and it fell down and rolled away. The guide last time looked for it, but he couldn't find it. Joe felt tears prickling at the back of his eyes. Even so, Dad says, you know you shouldn't have climbed down onto the mosaic. Imagine if everybody walked on it. He sighed. Never mind, I expect it'll be okay. And it's too bad about the St. Christopher. He handed Joe the book he'd just bought for him. Take better care of this, please. Now, shall we look around the rest of the museum quickly? I think Sam has suffered long enough, so we'll go soon. Joe followed his dad around the information boards and exhibit cases, trying to pretend that he was interested. But his heart wasn't in it anymore. What was the point in learning anything else about the place if he couldn't get back into Lucy's time again? He'd been so sure he would manage it somehow. As they drove into Chichester to have lunch, Sam chattered non-stop, clearly feeling that he was now in favour. Joe stared out of the window, too miserable to care. They had so little time with Dad. Why had he gone and spoiled today? That evening he tossed and turned in bed, unable to get to sleep. Sam snored beside him. It was all right for him, Joe thought bitterly. He pulled the pillow over his head to try and block out the noise and muffle the thoughts that churned in his brain. He needed something else to think about. But the only thing he ever thought about these days was Lucy's world, and Lucy had been the cause of all the trouble in the first place. Beneath the pillow, he felt as though the room moved around him. There was a hissing sound in his ears. He lifted the pillow, thinking that perhaps he was dizzy from lack of air. But he found his hands were empty. It was broad daylight, sunny and bright. He blinked. He was no longer lying down, but standing up. And he wasn't in Dad's flat, but back at the palace, at the southwest corner of the colonnades, exactly where he'd been when he disappeared from Lucy's world before. He steadied himself against the nearest pillar and looked around for the older boy who'd been threatening him. He was nowhere to be seen. Joe glanced down at himself to check that he wasn't still in his pyjamas. Once again, he was wearing Roman clothes. Even though it had happened before, he still found it weird. This time he had some kind of long-sleeved shirt underneath his tunic, and he could feel an extra layer beneath the skirt of it too. He lifted the hem to have a look. There was a pair of long, close-fitting shorts over his underclothes. At that moment he heard a noise. He glanced up. Lucy had just come out of the south wing. "Psst," he whispered. She turned round. "Joe? Is that you?" She looked around to see if either of them had been noticed, then hurried back along the colonnade towards him. "It is! You're back!" To his astonishment, she hugged him. "Hi, Lucy." He felt suddenly shy. She smiled. "I'd forgotten you decided to call me that. I like it." She took his arm. "Come with me. We can't talk here, not after what happened last time. We don't want anyone to see you." She steered him back around the western end of the south wing. "I have a secret place in the gardens. We can hide there for a bit. I'll go first. You follow me, not too close." She let go of him and set off purposefully down the lawns beyond the palace. About halfway down the slope, she cut across to the east. Joe followed at a safe distance, trying to keep bushes and tree trunks between him and the palace as much as possible, in case anyone was looking out. Finally, she disappeared into a kind of shrubbery. Joe looked around one last time, then ducked in after her. "Hopefully nobody will find us here," she said in a low voice. "Apart from the gardeners, the only person I know who comes here is Antonia." She settled herself on the outstretched branch of one of the shrubs. Joe looked around and spied a stump to sit on. Lucy gazed at him, shaking her head. "I can't believe you're here. You know, I was just thinking about you a few moments before you appeared." "That's funny. I was thinking about you too, sort of." He grinned sheepishly. "Do you think that's how it happened then?" "How what happened?" "How I came to be here again, by both of us thinking about each other at the same moment." "Maybe. I don't know." She bounced up and down gently on the branch. "I've thought about you quite a lot over the last 3 months." Joe frowned. "But it's only been 3 weeks." "No, it hasn't. You were here in July before, and now it's October." Joe looked around. The leaves of the shrubs were turning red and orange, and now that he thought about it, there was that sweet autumn smell in the air. "I'd pretty much given up hoping you'd come," Lucy said. "I don't get it." Joe scratched his head. "At home it's only the middle of August." They looked at one another. "It's also night time," he said. "I was in bed when I suddenly reappeared here." It hadn't occurred to him that he should be feeling tired. Sorry, it occurred to him that he should be feeling tired, but he wasn't at all. "So what did you do?" "Nothing, as far as I know. I was thinking about you and about this place, but there's nothing new about that. We even went to the museum again today, and I tried to get back here through the dolphin mosaic like last time." "What dolphin mosaic?" Joe laughed. "Of course, you wouldn't know about that." It could be fun, knowing a few things that Lucy didn't, he thought. Otherwise it was him asking all the questions, and her with all the answers. I guess you won't ever see it though, he added thoughtfully. What are you talking about? In 90 or 100 years, the people here are going to put down a beautiful mosaic in the room I landed in last time. It's what this palace will be famous for when the rest of it has disappeared. How do you know that? Lucy didn't seem impressed. Because I'm from the future. Well, from here it's the future. It's 2014 back at home. It can't be. She looked horrified. Why didn't you tell me that before? Jo thought about it. I don't know, really. I suppose I was a bit surprised to land up here. I didn't know where I was, but now I've read lots of books about your time and looked it up on the internet as well. What are books? Books? Jo smiled. I'd forgotten you don't have them. They're lots of bits of paper, held together in a bundle, with things written on each page. Like scrolls? Yes, kind of, but flat. And what's the internet? The internet? He paused. This was much more difficult. Well, the internet is like the biggest book you could ever imagine, only it doesn't actually exist anywhere on paper or anything, and you only look at the bits you want on a computer or a mobile or something. Lucy's brow furrowed with concentration. What's a computer? It's a kind of machine. Jo began again. Oh, never mind. I can't explain, and it doesn't matter anyway. None of it will be invented for nearly 2,000 years. He shrugged nonchalantly, but he was suddenly proud of the progress made by his parents' and grandparents' generations, even though it had nothing to do with him. Lucy was looking at him through narrowed eyes, however. I was right about you when we first met. You are an evil spirit after all. No, I'm not. Come on, Lucy, I'm just Jo. So you say. She still looked at him with suspicion. Look, it really doesn't matter where I come from. The main thing is, I'm here. I've been wanting to come back pretty much since the moment I left. That's the other thing. Lucy had stopped bouncing on the branch. What happened to you? You never came back to meet me like we agreed. Jo had the feeling she'd just remembered she was supposed to be cross with him. I don't know what happened, he said. I was standing on the colonnade, where I appeared just now, and a boy with curly black hair came and started talking to me. It was quite scary, actually. He wished at once that he hadn't admitted this. But Lucy's expression changed from annoyance to worry. Did you say anything to him? Jo nodded. I totally forgot that I wasn't supposed to talk. I wanted to know what he wanted to know what my name was. What did you say? I can't remember, but it wasn't what you'd said. I just blurted out the first 3 names I could think of. He knew straight away I was lying. Oh no. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself as though she were cold. That was Tiberius, in case you didn't realise. He can be really nasty. We don't want him to know anything about you this time. Well, I'm going to need a new story anyway, if I've been away so long, Jo said. And it needs to be a better one than last time. It's no good if I'm not allowed to talk, or I have to hide the whole time. I know, it wasn't a very good plan before. I didn't think it would matter, but it did. So did they notice I'd gone? He asked. My mother did. By that time it was just as well you had. She'd said something to my aunt about adopting a mute boy, and of course my aunt didn't know what she was talking about. I was afraid that would happen, Jo said. Yes, I should have thought of it. It just seemed like a bit of fun when I said it. Did you get into trouble then? Lucy looked at her feet. What happened? I got a whipping, she said quietly. Oh no! A cold shiver ran over Jo. That's dreadful. Lucy shrugged. The boys get whipped if they don't get their lessons right. I'm lucky it hasn't happened to me before. What did you say about who I was? I told them I didn't know, which is sort of true, isn't it? I said you'd turned up at the same time as everyone else, and that you'd told me you were my cousin." "So, if I'm supposed to have lied to you," Joe said, "why did you get punished? Surely that wasn't your fault." "No," Lucy sighed. "Unfortunately, there was a slave boy who ran away from a villa near here at the same time. They were convinced that was you." "Do you remember the ship we saw coming in that day? They thought you were going to try to stow away on it, but when they searched it, they couldn't find you or him, so they punished me instead for playing with a slave." Joe said nothing for a few moments. Nobody back in his own world had even known he'd gone. He might not be able to choose when he slipped through time, but the only kinds of consequences in his own life were things like Dad getting cross with him for standing on the mosaic. It hadn't occurred to him that Lucy might get into real trouble because of him. "Are you sure you want me to stay this time?" he asked. "Oh, yes." Lucy looked up at him. "I was cross with you for a couple of weeks after you'd gone, especially as you didn't say goodbye. But the slave thing wasn't your fault, just unlucky. Once my skin had healed and the bruising had gone down, I started to hope you'd come back." "Why?" "I like you," she said. "You're different, interesting. You probably think I have everything, but actually my life is often really boring." "Really?" "We never go anywhere. I haven't left the palace compound since we moved here, and we don't have friends. We hardly ever have visitors, except for people coming to see my father. I know we had my cousins here, and some of them stayed for over a month, but I didn't like any of them as much as you. Once they went, though, it seemed even more boring than before." Joe felt something warm in his chest. He was pleased that Lucy liked him so much. He thought about telling her that he liked her too, but decided it would sound soppy, even though it was true. "What about Tiberius?" he said instead. "What did you say about me disappearing right in front of him?" Lucy grimaced. "Nothing at all. I didn't even know you'd seen him. That's the trouble with Tiberius. He's always storing up information to use against you later on. So we don't know if I faded away or vanished into thin air, or if I seemed to go deaf and walked off. We don't know anything." Lucy shook her head. "The only thing we can do is arrange things this time so that he doesn't realise you're the same person." "But he'll recognise me. You did." She thought for a minute. "Maybe not if we dye your hair. Children never dye their hair, so he won't expect that." "How are we going to do that then?" "We'll ask our Arethusa again. She'll know how to do it." "Okay, then what? Why are you smiling?" "Okay," said Lucy. "The next thing is that you have to stop saying okay." Joe laughed. "Okay, that's my last one, I promise." Said Lucy. "Really, I'll try properly now. Actually, since I was last here, I've been noticing how often people say it at home. So at least I do hear it, mostly." "We'll see." She didn't sound convinced. There was a sound nearby. Joe stood stock still. "What was that?" he whispered. Lucy stood up silently and tiptoed to the edge of the shrubbery. "It's all right," she said, turning back towards him. "It's only one of the slaves doing some pruning." "Is that okay, though? I mean, is it all right? He might have heard us talking." She shrugged. "Even if he did, it's quite likely he doesn't speak enough Latin to understand. Gardening's the kind of job they give to the uneducated slaves." Joe dug with his toe in the soil at the foot of one of the shrubs. "Why would you educate a slave?" "You wouldn't," she laughed. "But as Rome conquers new lands, the army takes prisoners, and those prisoners are sent as slaves to other parts of the empire." She held her hand up before Joe could speak. "I know you think it's wrong, but it's the way things are here. You'll have to get used to it if you're staying." She went back to her branch. "The educated ones are used as teachers and scribes. I think we might need the help of one or two of them, as well as Arethusa." Joe frowned. Can you trust them? I think so. They're used to keeping their master's secrets, and there are a few who definitely like me, so if we stick with them, we should be safe. What are you going to get them to do then? Jo asked. Lucy tapped the side of her nose with her finger. I've had an idea, she said. So that's the thing with Lucy. She always has a plan, and often it's quite a good plan, although it's not always perfect, but she's often got an idea. I like that about her. She and Jo, they're a good team together. Okay, so that's it for today. Hopefully I've posted this to the right place this time. That would be good, wouldn't it? So same time tomorrow. That was chapter 6, so tomorrow we'll be on to chapter 7. We're coming up to halfway in this book, actually, so that's good. I hope you're enjoying it. Do send me a message if you fancy. You might have seen me, if you live anywhere near where I do, you might have seen this in the Salisbury Journal, because they ran an article about it, and I'm even supposed to be on the ITV West Country News. Could be very exciting. Anyway, so we'll see about that. But